Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. If you support a charity or a cause, the discussion over the next hour should prove particularly interesting. Tonight's subject is giving back.
There's an underlying sort of generosity in the community, which I think we all recognize.
What is most important is the commitment of the individual to attempt to make this world a more humane place and to begin to ease the suffering that faces so many.
Because obviously philanthropy is about improving the lives of people.
We've been very fortunate actually. We've had years and years of support from hundreds of people in Gibraltar. We're very lucky to have the footprint here that we do.
The calibre of all the speakers today has been excellent. Really live, topical questions.
And they have prospered. And they have therefore made Gibraltar their home, certainly made Gibraltar their centre of their business activities, and they want to give something back, as entrepreneurs often do.
Over the next 50 minutes, we'll bring you some highlights from this week's very engaging philanthropy conference. We'll hear about the origins of philanthropy in British Gibraltar, and we'll give you an insight into the astonishing courage and strength shown by some in the face of extremely difficult circumstances. But before we get stuck in here, what exactly is philanthropy?
Someone actually remarked this morning about philanthropy, comparing it perhaps with charity. And there is an interrelationship, but philanthropy is almost applying your mind to your heart. Because obviously philanthropy is about improving the lives of people. That's the basis of the whole thing, is to improve the lives of people, but in a very more sophisticated way. How you can actually do certain things now which will have an impact in the medium to long term. And it could be indirect connections, but very powerful connections. And those are the kind of things which we have been exploring today.
Philanthropy means that it's a very simple biblical text, and I'm not given to quoting biblical texts at all, because I'm not that sort of a religious person. But there is one which says, love your neighbour as yourself. You know, do unto others as you would be done by. I often think when I'm in a strange town, perhaps in an African town or sometimes in the suburbs of America, which can be pretty grim at times, and it's a cold night and it's raining, and I think to myself, if I was homeless now, with nowhere to go, no job, nothing to do, how would I feel? You know, and I think sometimes we'd all do well to try and put ourselves into the shoes of somebody else. We say, oh, well, they're homeless because they're wastrels. That's not true. I mean, people find themselves without a home for 1,001 reasons on the streets. So I think they can be summed up in two little phrases. Love your neighbour as yourself, and do unto others as you would hope to be done by. And that really is the essence of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone when they think of charity is led by the heart. Of course they are. You're led by your own personal experiences, whether you've had a relative in hospital or whether you've come from a low-income background and you've seen how things can be if you're from a poorer background. So you understand why people are coming from the perspectives they are, and it's crucial that we go with people's hearts. But equally, if we want to find out what works and what will make the most difference, then we need to apply our heads as well. And that's what we try and do as a funder of educational projects, is to look at what's worked around the world, not just within a UK context, but what's worked around the world.
If we think of philanthropy, I suppose we could think of volunteer work also being an aspect of that, but the forum principally is I suppose for clients, high net worth individuals or ultra high net worth individuals.
But not exclusively. I mean, every level counts. One of the big themes in philanthropy now is how very modest people, by giving of their time but also modest contributions, when you put them together, there's the power of scale. And because of the internet and because of social media, you're actually able to mobilize people in numbers and with volumes way beyond what might be possible, have been possible before. So you have a technology completely changing how funds are raised, collaboration, charities talking to each other, and therefore people of more modest means together being able to do things that individually they weren't able to do.
If somebody is watching this thinking, I'd like to do some philanthropy, I suppose it's about giving money and or giving time as a volunteer?
The first thing to me, I'm never asked people for money. I don't have. First of all, I'm bad at it. Secondly, I'm embarrassed by it. and third, I believe it's essential. I think what you want more than anything else is the commitment of that individual to whatever the cause is. If they make their commitment, well, some people don't have the money to give, who make the commitment, but they can give something of their time. Other people do say, well, I can't possibly give my time, I can give some money. Fine, good. The first thing is not the money. The first thing is, are you really concerned about whatever? The homeless, the youngsters, the people who are joining terrorist groups because they are influenced by these charismatic leaders, and there's no alternative for them. Are you really concerned about that? Okay, if you are, then what can you do about it? Can you give time? Can you give money? Can you do this, that, the other? So there are a variety of things, but the first thing is your commitment.
It's fantastic that people in Gibraltar are very generous towards charities, not just charities, the famous ones, Oxfam and others that are abroad, but also to the recognition that there are pockets and areas in Gibraltar where people need support, whether it be sometimes children who have difficult backgrounds, or in simple identified things. For instance, one of the charities we were involved in was to do with deafness and hearing and all the rest of it, and those have created an awareness with the community. But of course they do need funds, they do need training, and that's where charities like Kusuma or philanthropic projects like Kusuma come in and say, right, we'll bring out the training, we'll start the ball rolling. Our idea is always to enable, it's not to create dependency. We don't want someone to think that the money will always come from there and we'll do it. We don't hire people for charities, but we make sure that we try and take them from A to B so that they can then go on in their project and move forward.
It's true to say that when you have large wealth created, especially if it's new wealth, entrepreneurs that make money quickly, very immediately when they start to consider the future, the need for philanthropy or for structure to that wealth management becomes evident. So a lot of the more difficult skills arises in the area of how you get a corpus of money, which the philanthropist wants to put to good use, how you get that money to be properly managed, properly delivered, and the results of it shared not just for those who are receiving it, but also rebound very positively for those who are involved in the giving.
I think philanthropy internationally is a huge issue. It's a huge and growing consideration for businesses, individuals, wealthy and not. And this was really a coming together of four firms, which is ourselves at ISOLA, Hassan's, EY and Credit Suisse, with really the common interest of engaging people in a debate on philanthropy. So that is, bringing together relevant experts, creating a forum for the exchange of ideas, but I think above all, really acting as a catalyst to get people engaged in the issues, to get people engaged in the debate, and obviously to have ourselves as firms collectively engaged in that debate as well.
We were ready last year for our first conference, and that kicked off, I think, let's say, a steep learning curve for all of us, but certainly it's gone from strength to strength, and we are really sort of evolving, very excited with the initiative, and just trying to really benefit from, let's say, the involvement that we have with, let's say, all these specialists that we bring over, philanthropists, to see, how we can ultimately benefit most for Gibraltar itself, as jurisdiction, as a community. So we're looking at all angles.
It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to formally open the forum today, and I hope and I'm sure that it will provide very much interesting dialogue, discussion on what is such a hugely important issue, not just here, of course, but entirely around the world. It's a wonderful example of how four different firms from the private sector can come together for such a worthwhile cause.
Clearly, one of the objectives, if you like, was to bring some, education and to have people who are connected in the world of philanthropy to come and share their thoughts with us. What is going out there? you know, we live in a society in Gibraltar where we're very fortunate, and there are problems. We just have to look at the news about the things that are happening in Gibraltar, in the rest of the world, poverty and so on. And there are initiatives through philanthropic ventures to actually make a difference.
I would say, generally speaking, from the, let's say, professional space, we are all, I think, a very tightly knit community as well. So there we all work very closely together, we have mutual clients, there is a high level of trust between individuals. So in a way, these are the preconditions for, I think, you know, just I think kicking off a long-term initiative, which this is.
They want to make Gibraltar be like a hub for philanthropic activity, which obviously has several connotations. It's not just about asking for money. In fact, we haven't asked for money in any of these events. It's about creating a place from which philanthropy can operate, and that will also be a financial centre issue as much as it is about the philanthropy itself.
What we found after we started was that actually there weren't many forums like this. We started off as it being a completely Gibraltar-centric event, but speaking to more and more international people, this idea of collaboration and bringing actual charities and experts together to be able to share their knowledge and experience wasn't really something that existed. So I think we've also been able to gain a bit of interest on a bit of traction on that side, and that's where we are today, the coming together of ideas and the exchange of ideas.
Lord Luce last night at a function gave some details of the impact of the Gates Foundation. Staggering work from one man. It begs the question, the more people that come together in an organised and collaborative way, the benefits will reach a far greater audience. And let's be clear, there is a need for that to happen.
I'm very pleased to be back in Gibraltar after, I think it was 14 and a half years ago that I left. This time I'm here for one very specific purpose, which is the very excellent Philanthropy Forum that has been arranged, led by people like Mr. Peter MONTEGRIFFO and Dominique to discuss the kind of networking in philanthropy, coordination of philanthropy work, greater understanding of philanthropy, which I think Gibraltar is very well placed to do. And so I was delighted to come down here and give some support to the project.
Kusuma really is only contributing, if you like, logistics. In fact, Angela Almeida, who is the full-timer in Kusuma, has been the person really doing all the donkey work and all the difficult work of coordinating people, coordinating the event, whilst the rest of the team, if you like, is looking at the much more sort of issues of where they want to go with the project and trying to get people interested from UK and other places, as well as the local people who could be involved in philanthropy.
Gibraltar's ability to give is outstanding. I believe many of you, certainly the ones of you that are here and working here, will know the per capita volumes of giving that Gibraltar has always been involved with. It's an example to the world. It's an extremely giving community, which, not just for local causes and those around the area, but far further afield, where Gibraltarian companies, individuals have been involved in giving for many, many years.
I'm going to be looking at historical philanthropy in Gibraltar from the start of the British period, 1704, up to the middle of the 20th century. I'm not going to be looking at the more recent generous benefactors who have contributed so much to the fabric of modern Gibraltar society. Entities such as the Kusuma Trust, the Bonita Trust, the Alwani Trust, and others. But the earliest recorded case of philanthropy in this period was that, believe it or not, of a woman. Gibraltar is very good with women. And so the first skull, the Neanderthal skull discovered at Gibraltar, is that of a woman. The first philanthropist was a woman. And she was a widow, Jane King. The next person I wanted to mention, John Gavino. Gavino made a will on the 12th of January 1818, and he died just a few months after that, on 22nd of May. He was single. His brother Thomas had predeceased him, and his executors were instructed to invest the proceeds of sale of his goods and chattels in buying property within the city of Gibraltar. And these properties, together with the houses that Gavino owned, which were bordered by Governor Street and Cornwall's Lane, were to be let yearly, monthly, or on leases of up to 3 years. And the trustees were told that they had to pay 25% of the rents to the civil hospital for the maintenance of the Catholic poor. The residue was to maintain the Cathedral of St. Mary the Crowned, for the relief of poor and needy Roman Catholic residents of Gibraltar, for the relief of widows and orphans and distressed families, to clothe, maintain, and educate the orphans and place them as apprentices with a suitable stipend, and to provide a cash dowry for orphan girls when they married. The Gavino estate built Gavino's Court. There's a picture there of the entrance to Gavino's Court with the Gavino coat of arms above it and a plaque on either side saying that these buildings had been built by the estate 6 years after Gavino died. And much later, a home for orphans and an old people's home in Prince Edward's Road was built for the poor. The two foundation stones, it's a lovely Italianate building. So he's the first philanthropist, really, to specifically make provision for education and training, in this case apprenticeships for orphans, and a minor element was looking after the poor and needy. There was a religious dimension. The beneficiaries were limited to Roman Catholics, so this is a distinction from that of Jane King. The Gavino estate rebuilt the property where Gavino actually had his own house, which is now Gavino's Passage off Cornwall's Lane, and they couldn't really spell trustees correctly on the plaque. It's an awful shame. And the estate is still in existence today, nearly 200 years later.
Well, from the very beginning, obviously, when commercial entities want to collaborate on a project, there's always going to be clearly an identification of where there could be a commercial benefit in the future. But I can tell you that from the very beginning, the main desire of the four firms was to actually, educate people and to actually make a difference and help position Gibraltar in a way which it has never been done before.
Importantly, and today is an example of that, there is a corporate responsibility. How can we work together to make more companies aware of the need to give, to participate and to become involved in philanthropy? And at the same time, as these companies and these individuals, wealthy individuals, join in this, how do we really ensure that the monies that are collected are best spent?
Obviously, there's an underlying sort of generosity in the community, which I think we all recognize. And we've been thinking that, clearly that, this is the perfect backdrop in which to maybe start this debate, discussion, sow the seeds for people to think, and it's come up in today's conference several times, to think more strategically in the way they give, and really sort of make commitments to maybe long-term initiatives as opposed to being, I think, just more erratic in their giving, as I think many of us tend to be.
And the idea, therefore, is that by being more strategic, you can have a greater impact and do more good.
I think ultimately it's making sure that you increase your chances of success, you make initiatives sustainable, you partner up with other like-minded individuals, with other specialists who maybe have similar experiences. So I think it has many spin-offs, and I think the whole thing is about being open-minded and open to listening to others and working with others. And that will lead, I think, to ultimately much more structured approach. Not any straight jacket sort of sense, but rather in a way which will allow you to have an ultimate objective and to really, maybe leverage on individuals getting together and having a much greater impact than if we each went our own way to do whatever we want to do.
This is not just about international emergencies, as you all know, important as they are, of course. But it's about education. It's about assisting those in need of better health services, water, those that suffer from hunger. Research, support in the skills and administration of running these organizations effectively and efficiently, and in the management of those too. The impact of wealthy donors these past years has done a huge amount in this area to create better awareness, to invest enormously in sustainable developments, in research and in assisting.
From positions of relative wealth and comfort and high standards of living like Gibraltar, like Britain, do you feel there's almost a moral imperative to be involved in less well-off places and to try and make a difference in those places?
I think a moral imperative is one way to look at it, but I think it's hugely enriching, actually. For me personally, I support a range of charities in and above my ActionAid role, and I think I get so much back from doing that, and I think probably all of our supporters here would echo that they get probably more than they put in, actually, whether it's in the shape of a letter from a child that they've sponsored, or an update in the news on a community that they know they've supported for many, many years, or an update from my team saying, because of you, we could save this many lives, or we could develop this hospital, this school, whatever it may be. So I think, personally, I think everyone's motivation is different. Part of it is because we were all lucky to be born, perhaps into the world we were born into. But I think you get so much from giving back as well, and that's something that you can do as a family in a wonderful way, and everyone wins.
And that in itself illustrates very clearly how important it is that all of us, in our different ways, become involved in philanthropic endeavour. It's not just a giving of money. I said that yesterday. Someone said to me, what is the most important thing? Is it money? I said, no, it is not necessarily the giving of money that's most important. I don't ask for money myself. What is most important is the commitment of the individual to attempt to make this world a more humane place and to begin to ease the suffering that faces so many.
Tonight's Viewpoint is entitled Giving Back, and a little later we'll be profiling some organisations involved in philanthropy. We'll also spend a bit more time speaking to Terry Waite, an extraordinary humanitarian, about his experiences and how they've strengthened his resolve to help others. Before we take a commercial break though, we'll hear about another great local philanthropist.
Then we move at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, John Mackintosh, Gibraltar's largest benefactor and philanthropist. He was born in July 1865. He was a ship owner, a supplier of bunkers to ships, first coal, then oil, a director of several companies, including Secone & Speed, the wine and spirits merchant. He lived at the top of Library Street, there far left, within a stone's throw of Gavino's Court, just round the corner, in fact just opposite us over here, the Garrison Library. But he was very generous all his life. He helped financially all those who crawled up to his house at Prince Edward's Road, seeking his assistance, if he considered the case was meritorious. And he was a very quiet benefactor. He liked to do his charity without sort of banging gongs and beating drums. And during his life, he helped countless individuals. He died during the war, 28th of February 1940, and within months, the main square in Gibraltar was renamed John Mackintosh Square. It had been Commercial Square up to that point. It now became John Mackintosh Square. His bust sits there, you can see it on the right. And his widow, Victoria, carried into effect John Mackintosh's wishes, because he left all his money to Gibraltar. At the time, it was well in excess of £1 million. Some estimate that it was, in today's values, somewhere in the region of 1.4 billion. And in his will, John Mackintosh left careful instructions on how the money he left was to be applied. He wanted to further English culture and education, and this is reflected by the plaque at the entrance to John Mackintosh Hall, which opened in April 1964. It's a cultural centre, a theatre, meeting rooms, library, music library, gymnasium, meeting rooms. And John Mackintosh also specifically left money so that scholarships could be offered, so that young men and women could go to university and train and benefit society through their training. He also left money to care for the elderly, like Gavino, but on a much larger scale. 3 homes were built, separately for the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans and Jewish persons. They opened in 1964. The Catholic homes, Mount Alvernia is there on the right, the Jewish home is on the left. And money from the Mackintosh legacy was also used for health purposes. A wing was added to St. Bernard's Hospital. Well, he received no honours from Gibraltar in his life, but posthumously, when the Gibraltar Medallion of Honour was created in 2008, he was meritoriously given this award. Looking in summary at the first 275 years of British Gibraltar, we can identify a number of things. There were a number of philanthropists. They responded to what were perceived to be the priorities of the day. Poor people were identified as needing support. John Mackintosh ushered in a new approach, a more targeted strategic vision, and looking at lifestyle issues rather than simply bettering the lot of individuals who were unfortunate. He was encouraging British culture. Well, the advent of the welfare state has done away with the need to care for the vulnerable in society in the way that was necessary in the 18th and 19th centuries, but philanthropists do continue to provide additional medical equipment and the like when that is identified and needed. There's an important role for philanthropy going forward to provide funding in areas where public monies would not be available or would not be available as soon given other spending priorities. Education and training have now been given a much higher profile by the later benefactors. And improvements to the environment are now a new area of support for philanthropists that would never have occurred to our historical philanthropists.
Well, for a start, it's fantastic that it's happening in the first place, that a place like Gibraltar, clearly has always taken philanthropy seriously, is now trying to take that to the next level, to really think what next, about how private individuals, organisations can mobilise themselves to look at the problems that there are around you and to think, okay, those of us who are more fortunate, how can we help those who are less fortunate? So to have the kind of discussions that bring together a range of people from around Gibraltar and to have that focused conversation about, okay, we've done a lot in the past, now what's next, what's new, how can we test it out, how can we bring people together, how can we leverage more money to make the biggest difference. It's been really encouraging from my point of view, never been to Gibraltar before, but see the energy that there was today and see the diversity of people that were here, all committed to that aim, was for me quite inspiring.